Well, hello again. It's me with another one of these things. And this one is a bit different because I'm going to rank the WiLDHEARTS albums in order of my personal preference. Now, this is going to be a bit divisive because you've all got your own reasons for liking albums, and they're probably not the same reasons as I've got, especially with the WiLDHEARTS. Yeah, we might as well just get stuck in because this is going to be a long one and it's going to make a few enemies, but hopefully it's going to reveal a few things that you don't know or you didn't already know, and you will do later. But I'm not going to include live albums. I figured it would be best not to include live albums, but I am going to include the compilations like Riff After Riff and the Don't Be Happy Just Worry thing with the 2 EPs. I'm going to make sure that all of that, anything that's original songs basically, I'm going to cobble together. Diving straight in, I've got my cup of tea here. Grab a little sip of that before we get started because this one is going to be a long one. And I've got a list of 14 albums here. The first one is at the bottom of the list at number 14. In the bin with it, Landmines and Pantomimes. Now, a lot of these albums, I'm going to talk about what they mean to me. That's going to be reflective in their order of rank. This album means nothing to me because I haven't heard it. I don't think I've listened to this album once. It was written when we were on tour with AC/DC. And I was literally, grabbing little chunks of time in the dressing room or in toilets if the dressing room was full of people, which it was a lot of the time, and just scrambling songs together. We never even played these songs as a band until we got in the studio and started demoing them. And then when we started demoing, I was like, oh, some of this is going to work. Some of this we need to go away and work on. And then halfway through the demo session, or halfway what I thought was going to be the demo sessions, the budget was pulled. And the next thing I know, the album's being released as a supposedly finished album. We hadn't even finished writing it, let alone recording it, demoing it, getting it right. So, yeah, this album, it means nothing. I can't even remember what songs is on it. Aboria, I think, is a good one. Ride the Wave of Fun. Tom, Take the Money, that would have been a good song. See, these songs being fleshed out, because I never ever did demos. I still don't like doing demos. But back then I never did demos, and this was the first time I ever did demos. Boy, what a lesson I learned. Don't do demos, then they can't fucking release them. A bit like doing a porn tape. Don't do a porn tape, it can't get online. Anyway, we did demos, they got released. It's a pile of shit. Some of the songs could have been fleshed out to something really good, I think, but it didn't work out like that. I would avoid that one like the plague if I was you. Number 13, not a bad album, but I'm going to get my ears on straight. There. I can see myself in this screen, you see. Number 13, not a bad album. I really enjoyed making it, and I really liked the process because we weren't doing anything. And we needed something to do. And I thought, I know what, we can do a cover version album. And I know this is not original songs, like I said in the beginning, but it felt like a band effort. It was done really, really quick. It was done in a studio, in a rehearsal studio rather, and we were next door to the loudest band I've ever heard in my life, and we still managed to do it, or rather Jace Edwards still managed to do this, still managed to make it sound like we did it in a recording studio. But it was just a lot of songs that we all liked, and we just chucked them together, and I thought it made a really pleasant, full album. I enjoyed it, and I think there's some good stuff on there. A lot of the thing about this was I didn't want to do songs that everyone has heard, typical punk songs and rock songs and stuff. So we did try and mix it all up with bands that people probably haven't heard before. And the good thing about this album was it got a lot of people into a lot of bands. And that's, as anyone knows me, knows that's one of my favourite things in the world to do, is to pass on the gift of music. So I think this did that. Therefore, it deserves a place in this list, but maybe not as a proper album. I like it, but it's next to the biggest pile of shit that we have on our roster. Number 12. This is going to make a few enemies. Fishing for Luckies. Okay, all will be revealed, but I'll let you know why Fishing for Luckies is in my bin. It's, to me, fairly worthless album because it wasn't an album. I remember when it came out and I just thought, we're getting an album review and there's no album. It's just, it was part of PHUQ that was supposed to be a double album. And this was the songs that the record company rejected and then later wanted because we released them as a fan club thing, just for our fans. And they decided, no, we want them back. We want to make a record out of them. I'm like, but you fucking blew your chance last time. We'll go into this in more detail later on. But the record company made the biggest error in the world, not letting us do PHUQ as a double album. So the songs that they sacked off, the released version, they stuck on this thing called Fishing for Luckies, which then became Fishing for More Luckies, which then became Fishing for Luckies. So by the time it came out, it meant absolutely nothing. Nothing to me. Absolutely nothing. Yeah, there's some good songs on the released, re-released version that became Fishing for Luckies that we had in the studio with Jeff. It was the first time we recorded with Jeff, and that was great. We did Moose Swings and Roundabouts, In Like Flint, Soul Searching on Planet Earth. They were good songs. They were written for the thing. Sick of Drugs and Red Light, Green Light had already been released as singles after PHUQ, before Fishing for Luckies. This, honestly, going through this list to try and find my albums, and what a mess. What a mess. You know, most bands have just got this album then, not the WiLDHEARTS. Couldn't be, could it? It's got to be all over the fucking place. But Sick of Drugs and Red Light, Green Light, they were already written and released as singles before Fishing for Luckies, and then they were tagged on to this fucking posh bootleg that you know as Fishing for Luckies. But it was pleasant because we got to record with Jeff Stretfield, and it was, I think, the only album that we did with Jeff. I know we did Endless Nameless will come into that, but that wasn't really much of a band effort. But yeah, that's why I hate Fishing for Luckies. Looking at the song list, yeah, I can see why you like it, but it as a creative, that wasn't an album. That wasn't going away and making an album. That was a hodgepodge of ideas that had already been done as a desperate cash-in by East West Records. Few of you looking at me funny, but all will be revealed by the end of the list. Don't you worry about that. And number 11, I've got Riff After Riff and Coupled With, which is, they're both kind of the same album, I think. Coupled With was for the UK, Riff After Riff was for America, and then Japan had their own version, which was a mix of both. Again, very confusing time. Tons of B-sides. John Poo was in the band, so we were writing a lot, and there was just tons of B-sides, tons of songs. I just wanted to do new songs all the time. I had them, and I wanted to record them. The thing about this album is it was released, Riff After Riff anyway, was released in America. It was one of our only releases in America when we were with Gearhead. And we were on tour with The Darkness in America, and Riff After Riff was the album that everyone was into. So it's got fond connotations, tendrils of emotion there. With that record, and Coupled With, I remember with doing the cover of Coupled With, it was me and my girlfriend at the time who were having the worst argument. We weren't speaking to each other, and I remember it just felt like trying to grab hold of a hedgehog, grabbing hold of a hand. I imagine she felt exactly the same way, and it was the most uncomfortable cover next to Earth Versus and the last one, but for different reasons. Riff After Riff, it's got tons of great songs on. People That Life Forgot. and move on. And Action Panzer, I remember going to the studio and we had no songs on this one studio. I used to love going to the studio for a weekend with nothing and coming out with something mixed and finished. But we went in this time and we had no songs. I thought we'll just write it in the studio, and we did. We came out with all these songs. But Better Than Cable, Looking for the One, great song. Stormy in the North was on this one. It didn't get released on The WiLDHEARTS Must Be Destroyed for whatever reason. Limited, John Poole's song Limited, that was great. Cheers was on this one. Cheers was the one song that we did that really got the airplay, the more airplay than anything. In fact, I think it was Chris Evans used to play it all the time, and he said, I'm not going to stop playing this song until you put it in the charts. And bless him, he played it every morning, and no cunt fucking bought it. It never went in the charts, but I liked it. Again, that was one of John Poole's ideas, to do Cheers. Lake of Piss, If I Decide. Bang was on there. It's a great song. You got to get through what you got to go through to get what you want, but you got to know what you want to get through what you got to go through. Don't know if that's the longest title of all time, but it's definitely ours. And that was a great song. I really enjoyed that. Action Panzer was great. Honestly, a great bunch of songs. Really good bunch of songs, I thought. It's a compilation album technically, but I'm fond looking back. I'm very fond of it, and it meant a lot at the time for various reasons. Fucking hell, what a mad time. Great fun. All of this stuff. If there's any questions that you've got based on these selections and my opinions on these selections, then let me know. If there's any little bits that I talk about that I don't elaborate on, ask me about that. Because on every album, as you can imagine, in every album, there was tons of stories, tons of mental things going on. Obviously, I'm not going to go into them all now, but it was, I don't think we've done an album where there wasn't a lot going on. Just one of them kind of bands. At number 10, Don't Be Happy, Just Worry, and Mondo Akimbo, which both came out on the same thing. And I fucking liked them. I know it's not technically an album, but it means more to me as an album than Fishing for Luckies did. There's more original songs as far as I'm concerned on this one. But I remember, that was the beginning when I was in the choir boys and I was getting fired from the band, and I'm, walking around, what the fuck am I going to do with my life? And I just kept this song Turning American kept going through my head. And I was just, walking around in Los Angeles, walking around in London, walking around in Newcastle. This song kept going around my head. And I'm going to resurrect that band that I formed in Newcastle a few years ago called the WiLDHEARTS. And we're going to do this song, Turning American. Very naive, but when you listen to that song, there's kind of the blueprint of everything that we do. Everything that you like about the WiLDHEARTS is in that one song. So it's kind of letting this idea percolate really did a number on my writing for a start. It made me realise, well, I like that. Why can't I combine them all into a song? And that was the start of everything. And then, Mondo came out and Bam was on drums, and we were touring with Love Hate and the Manic Street Preachers, obviously, and Wolfsbane and Diamond Head. But the Manic Street Preachers one was the thing that solidified us as a band. I remember that being my kind of gateway to, rock and roll madness. I mean, I'd always tried to practice it, but I wasn't able to do it with a tour bus, and with a bunch of people that wanted to get as fucked up as I did. It was fucking insane. I remember there was a lot of blood around at the time. There used to be, everyone was bleeding. There's always someone bleeding. Maybe that was, some of the Dogs de Mall thing that Bam brought in. But whenever there was anyone going mental, there would always be someone cutting themselves. I remember getting this tattoo. You see it there. Is it a fish? Can you see that? Yeah, that one there. And you can see there's kind of carved markings there in my arm. I remember there was one fucking crazy time where people were just breaking things and cutting themselves, and I was like, just did that. I didn't realise it was going to go deep. and you know I haven't got a lot of fat on me, so it just went straight through into the muscle, and it was just pouring. There was these bits that looked like little marshmallows of fat coming out my arm. I was like, I like gore movies, and they never told you that happens in the gore movie. And we were on tour, and I was like, fuck, I'm going to see my mum in Newcastle. She can't be seeing this. So I booked a tattoo. And there was this guy who was an ex-biker, an ex-Hells Angel, I think it was. Ex-army, I think he was as well. Hardcore guy. And I was like, there's a lot of scar tissue there, but it's thin. Do you mind going through that? And he was like, no, I'll go through that. And he was tattooing, and obviously the scar tissue opened up. And more of these marshmallows came out. And his face, this hardened, fucking hard man, was just barfing. It was just like, this is disgusting. In all my years of tattooing, I've never seen anything as disgusting as that. But bless him, he kept it going. He tattooed around the open wound area, and I saw my mum, and she didn't notice the big slash marks, so it worked. But it's a bit messy right now. But anyway, that was the Mondo time, and Bam, the same lineup with Bam, recorded "Don't Be Happy, Just Worry," and again, tons of great times. We were doing that in Seattle with Terry Date, and me and Danny went over. I just got my first publishing deal, so I had some money, so we went over to Seattle. Was in the studio, Bad Animals, where Heart had done their albums, and tons of great bands. Loving Seattle, and we met these two nutcases, this ex-sailor called Tattoo, and this other guy who I think was another sailor. Why we were hanging out with sailors I do not know, called Murphy. And we decided that we were just going to board an aeroplane and go to Mexico while they were mixing this album. And we didn't make it to Mexico the first time because we got kicked off the aeroplane for misbehaving. Tattoo and Murphy just had the gift of the gab, and they talked us into not only not being arrested by the police who were there to greet us, but putting us in a hotel. Don't know what they said, but we were all in this hotel in LAX, drinking margaritas and looking out at the sky, and we all saw this UFO. It was this big ball that came over, stopped right in front of us. I mean, this thing was fairly big as well. It certainly wasn't an aeroplane, because there was tons of aeroplanes flying off. It was a fucking LAX airport. And this thing just stopped, turned around, and whoosh, went up in the air. All four of us saw it. Just tons of great things. Mexico was fucking insane. Ask me about Mexico. But yeah, Don't Be Happy, Just Worry. That's why it's in this list, because I've got very, very fond memories of that. At number 9 in this list, we have The WiLDHEARTS Must Be Destroyed. And again, this is an album that really separates people. Two halves. There's people in the UK who don't like it because it's too poppy. People in America who love it because it was the first thing people heard from the band. And, it probably was inspired by my love of American music and American pop rock, which is why they got what I was trying to do with this album. So there was, the communication, the transatlantic divide was established with this album. Okay, I've got mixed feelings about this one. I enjoy the album. I like what it did. I like where we went with it. I like that it got us on tour with The Darkness in Europe, which turned into a tour of America, which I've already talked about a little bit. Again, fucking hell, what a mental time. But it was bittersweet. It was really bittersweet, this album, because we went in the studio. We had Russ Russell doing it with us, and I think Simon Effermy was there at some point, both of which have done tremendous work with Napalm Death, as well as many other bands. But we started the album, but the demos ended up being better than the album for some reason. Well, I know the reason, because we were a band when we were doing the demos, and then we went in to do the album, and it all fucking fell apart. Danny had relapsed from the demo point to the album point, and couldn't make the studio, didn't want to do the studio. I'd said, look, if you can't make the studio, you know, we're on a fucking really, really strict budget, and we've got the time booked. With a band who are on a budget like ours, and there's time booked in the studio, you don't get to go, oh, well, we'll cancel that and we'll come back later, like the big bands do. So Danny was like, I can't make the album. And I was like, well, this is the time we've got in the studio. If you're not here, I'm the only one that knows the fucking song, so I'll play the bass. And then he'd said, well, if you play the bass, I'm not going to do the tour that we had booked. Now, let me explain. The album had a tour in the middle of it. I mean, there's been some ridiculous ideas over the years, but this is one of the more ridiculous. To break up the album recording to go on fucking tour. So the first half of the album, it's falling apart. Danny's not turned up. I'm playing bass. I fucking really didn't want to do that. And then we decide that we've got to get another bass player we haven't got a bass player. We can go out as 2 guitars and drums, which we probably should have done, actually. But I thought, the only bass player that I know who can learn these songs really quick is John Poole. John Poole joined the band for the tour and then just kind of stayed there for ages. And, that was one of my favourite times. But at this point, there was so much responsibility on my shoulders. I mean, I'm co-producing this record, writing all the songs again, which again I didn't want to do. I was hoping everyone would come in with ideas. We're on tour with Amen, which was great because I got to meet Scott Sorry, who was playing bass with Amen. My girlfriend's band at the time, Darling, were opening up. It was just a great, great tour, but it was crazy. We were doing a lot of everything. And if the tour had just stopped and I got a chance to go and recuperate, no problem. But we were straight back in the studio. I think the bus took me from the last gig to the studio, and I was back in the studio. And I remember recording the vocals for the re-recording of Vanilla Radio. Of course, we recorded it again from the single version because why wouldn't we? It's the Wildhearts. Everything's got to be done arse about tit. So I'm in the studio doing the vocals for Vanilla Radio, and I remember being in the studio and thinking, last time we were here, before the tour, they didn't have all these curtains up. And I said to Russ behind the glass, when did you put all these curtains up? And he went, there are no curtains. And all of a sudden, these curtains started coming down. And I could feel my feet going through the floor. And I'm like, I've had a lot of weird experiences in my life, but I've never had this one. What the fuck is going on? And I had a nervous breakdown. Throw this into the conversation. Yeah, I had a nervous breakdown, ended up in hospital. The last thing I remember was these curtains, this floor business, and then being in hospital. Apparently quite a few things happened in between these two things happening, but I ended up waking up in hospital, getting a little bit better, going back to the studio, finishing it off. I mean, you can imagine finishing off this album was just like pushing shit uphill in a fucking wind while it's raining. Horrible. I probably would favour the album more had the story of the recording not been as fractured and ugly as it is.